I will get into my NDE so that I can maybe give you a little bit of what I came out with because that's the big thing is what came out of it. So a lot of times when people hear that I had a near-death experience when I was 6 months old, they immediately decide they don't want to listen anymore because not too many people, but some, okay, because they don't understand how it could be possible for somebody to have a near-death experience so young and then to somehow remember what happened. And so it's really not that difficult to understand that when you're talking about the things that happen in the other world, in the afterlife, so to speak, and even the things that we believe exist here, when those two worlds come together in your consciousness, there's no such thing as time. So for somebody, and we do this all the time, right? When you're daydreaming or something, you can feel back to some other event and you can feel the emotions. You could almost feel like you're there again. It's really not that different from what happened with me. So when I was about 15 years old, I had all of these dreams and I had all of these visions that at first I was just like, they're just dreams, visions. I'm not going to pay too much attention to them. But I kept getting them. I kept experiencing them more than just a few. And they felt real. They felt so real that every time that especially when I dreamt, when I was sleeping and dreamt these things, I would wake up and I was always like in a cold sweat, or I was crying a lot because I didn't want to be here. And I was like, I'm 15 years old and I'm like, why am I feeling this way about these dreams? Why are these dreams so intense? Well, they were intense because they were beautiful, but why did it feel like I didn't want to be here? That was the big one. And so what happened was is that I eventually went to my mother, and because she was part of my big part of my dreams, and I asked her, did this really happen? I have this dream that I feel like I died, but I was really, really young. Did this really happen? And I explained to her what I saw, which is what I'm going to share with you here in a few minutes. And she just was extraordinarily shocked. Like her mouth was open and she was like, I never shared this with anybody. Many of the things that yes, everybody, there were people that knew about my near death, mostly my family that still lived in South America. But even that, the memory had faded away a lot, but nobody had told me anything about my death. And she was like, how did you know this? And she said, well, not so much how do you know this, but why do you know it so well? What were the details? How do you know these details? And I told her, I said, I saw dreams. I had dreams and visions, and it was very clear to me. I felt you. And so she always thought she always thought that my near-death experience and how I survived it, she thought that was the miracle all these years. But then she started saying, no, the real miracle is that you remember all of this and that you remember what I felt. You felt me like you felt me like you were me. And I said, yeah, I did. And she goes, you got to tell people. Now you got to remember, this was a little while ago, okay? And so I was like, no, I'm not going to tell anybody because if you tell people this kind of stuff in sort of the mainstream world, they're going to think you're cuckoo, okay? I say cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It's a cereal, but it's a cuckoo, okay? And so, or they'll give you medication or both, and they'll label you and all that stuff, okay? So I was like, no, I'm not gonna talk about it. So what did I dream? I dreamt that I had this dream that I was in the hospital, and it was a very kind of an older hospital. It didn't feel like I was in the United States, which is where I've lived almost all my life. I felt like I was somewhere else, and I was in that room with my mother and some other people that I didn't recognize. My aunt was there, but the other people I didn't know who they were, and they were all very, very sad. They were all like crying. They were near this little tiny incubator where there was this little baby. And at first, when I first had these dreams, I didn't really make the connection that I was the baby. Okay, it wasn't until I started having dreams and visions about what happened to the baby that I realized that that baby was me. Okay, so in the first set of dreams and visions, all I experienced was being in the hospital, being with my mother, sitting next to her, like you would see in the movies, the person that's already passed on sits next to their loved one. And I could feel her emotions. I could feel what she was feeling and what she was thinking. And I thought that that was really odd because I didn't know how many dreams do you feel the emotions of the people in your dreams. It's usually your own feelings. Anyway, so I saw the whole experience as it was happening. And what had happened, this part was the little piece that my mother told me, was that I came to the hospital because I was very sick. And I had a really bad cough. And we were going to be leaving to come to the United States in a short period of time, and she was concerned about my health. And so she took me to the doctor at the hospital. It was kind of a hospital clinic. And the doctor said that the chances are that I had pneumonia, bronchitis, or something. They had to keep me in the hospital to make sure that they could watch me to make sure I wasn't going to get worse. And so within an hour or two, things got really, really bad. I mean, I got really, really sick, and my organs were starting to shut down. And the doctor realized that, and there were actually several doctors, they realized that they were not going to be able to keep me alive for very longer. It was just happening too fast, and there wasn't anything they could really at the time do. This was many years ago. And so I remember, so that part of it was the little piece that I got from my mother. And then I found myself in the room. I found myself with my mother. I found myself standing next to her when the doctors told her to please go out into the hallway, and they were going to tell her the news that I had maybe I would live overnight, but chances are I was only going to live a couple more hours. And so at that time they said to her, would you like to see if we can get the rest of your family here? Do you want the priest or the minister or chaplain of the church to come and be with you and do the last rites and all that stuff that they do when people are ready to die? And all of this, I'm watching it next to her. She's to my left, I'm to her right, and I can feel everything that was going on with her. I felt when the doctor told her the news, I felt how her energy just closed. It went, and it closed, and all that I heard was the doctor going, wah, 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 like it didn't register with her, at least not in the surface. And so, but I knew, through what I could hear, that he was telling her all of this stuff, okay? And so, so she got into the bedroom, she went back into the hospital room and picked up a few things. And instead of staying at the hospital for the last few hours of my life, she got her things and she left the hospital and she went to a church that was very nearby. And my mother was a very religious woman. She was raised as a Catholic, and especially back then in South America, in Colombia, there was a real intense sort of relationship that people had with Christianity, Catholicism, especially the Virgin Mary. Okay, and so she decided to go to the church to pray to her, and when she did, when she got close to the hospital, she got close to the church, she got on her knees and she crawled to the church. It was a way of showing her devotion. Okay, and so she went on her knees, she went up the stairs on her knees, she went into the church on her knees, she crawled all the way on her knees to the altar. And I felt all of it. I experienced all of that with her. I wasn't in her, but I was by her, and I could feel all of her experience. So she got to the altar and she started to pray. But it was very different. And I write about this. I wrote a book about this, and not just this experience, but so many other things that came out of the experience. And I wrote in that book that I was really surprised. I was really surprised that she wasn't praying. She wasn't praying to please, 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 heal my son, cure him. It wasn't that kind of a prayer. It was almost like a meditation, kind of like a meditation of gratitude. Okay, it was like a conversation she was having with whatever she thought was God. Okay, and it was thank you for the 6 months that I had to be with you, with him, with me. Okay, and I was sitting there, and even at that age, I was going, this seems odd. This seems really different, that she's just thanking something for the time that she had with me, even though it was only 6 months. It never came out of her mouth to say, please, 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 save my child. It was just, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And in doing that, she was remembering all these beautiful experiences that she had. The love that she had for me was really deep. It was really emotional. It was very beautiful. It was very powerful. And so at a certain point, so all this time, the energy in the church is I could feel the energy of the church. It was changing with her emotions. And then I realized that at a certain moment that energy switched, and something happened to her. I could feel that she could feel and see, okay, my future. Not the future that I was going to have, but the future of what she felt my life would be like if I would have lived. And so she started to see all images of me and how I would grow up, and how, the lives that I would impact. Was I a good person, a good son, a good father, those kind of things. And she was so excited. She was so happy to see that. She thought she was being given a gift to see my future in a way that she would never get to see, because she knew I was dying. But she felt it was a gift that she got to see it anyway. This is what his life would have been like had he lived. And so she said, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for giving me the chance to see this, to experience, because she got to see it as though she was there. And so she was crying. She was crying already, but she was really crying out of joy. And again, I was kind of sitting and going, this is kind of interesting. She's crying out of joy, out of gratitude, appreciation. Okay. And it just didn't go very long when all of a sudden the church shifted again. The energy in the church shifted again. It was this real strong feeling of calmness, peacefulness. And at that moment, when my mother felt that, it just kind of went through her body, and she's just like, and she felt that peace. And so she got up, and she walked out of the church and went back to the hospital. And when she got to the hospital, there were all these people waiting for her at the front. They didn't know where she went. And there were these people standing at the front door, and many of them were crying. And so she thought I had died while she was in the church. But instead, they came up to her, and the doctor in particular, the one who told her I was going to die within a few hours, told her, I don't know what happened. I have no idea. I have no answer for this. But when you left, his organs, his body was shutting down. And when you were out somewhere doing whatever you were doing, his body functions all came back again. Everything is normal. Fever was starting to break. My organs were all functioning much, much better. And so much so that I left the hospital the next day. And all they did, as most doctors would, oh, this is a miracle. It's a medical miracle. Okay, bye-bye. See ya. That was it. Okay? And especially this is a very rich, faithful kind of, back then it was really strong in Christianity and stuff, in Catholicism. So people were like, oh, that's beautiful. It all happened, all good, miracle. And that was it. They never talked about it again. Very, seldom they did. So then the second part of my dream, this is the part that I was telling you that it really made it more real to me, that it was me that was experiencing my story was because the second part of the dream and the visions that I would have is that I was actually in the room. But this time, when my mother left, I did not go with her. This time, when she left, I stayed there, and I went to the little baby that was in the incubator, and I made a connection right away with that baby, consciously, something. I just made I understood the baby really well to be me. And at that point, I experienced the energy of the baby, the sort of, let's call it the soul, but the consciousness of that baby moving out of the body into me, and then I started to drift up to the top of the ceiling where I could see everything. Okay? Exactly the way I was seeing it when I was sitting next to my mom, but this time I was seeing it from up at top. And within just a few moments, it wasn't very long, the whole room went dark. And not when I did anything, I just stood there. It went dark, and it went dark. And so then a few moments later, this light appeared, beautiful light, and when it opened up into this space. I did not know there was no such thing as stories about near death back then. There was nothing that. So I was just kind of like, okay, what's next? And so what happened next was that this beautiful visual occurred, and I found myself in the middle of the desert, which I always thought was really strange. But I now know why I was in the desert, but it took me years later to understand this. But for now, I was in the desert, and there were these people down below, and they were staring at me, probably because I thought I was floating, and so people were going to stare at me because I'm floating. But it turns out that they weren't looking at me. They were looking through me. And so when I turned around, I noticed that they weren't really looking at me. I noticed that they were looking at something behind me. And so when I turned around, I saw that what they were looking at was this beautiful orb, this ball of light. And it looked probably like I say normally like about 10 times the size of our sun. Okay. And I remember the only thing that I really remember feeling into right away was that I looked at the sun, and I was like going, it's not hurting me. My eyes are not going like this, okay? It was really warm and gentle on my eyes. And I could feel that it was pulling me closer, and that it was coming closer to me. But I still had no idea why it was happening. I mean, I did not have the sense that I had died, because I thought this was all just a dream, okay? And so then I look back, and the people are still looking at me, but this time I really focused. I was seeing there was this little boy, and he kept putting his hands out, and like as if he was really hungry, because he didn't look very good. He had these old dirty clothes, and he looked very frail, and he was hungry, and he was reaching his hand out to touch the sun, okay? And so I looked back at the sun, and now it's on top of me. And when I felt it, I could feel my body was starting to vibrate. But I didn't know why that was happening. So I turned around, and all of a sudden this light just totally covers me. And when it does, it goes through my body. And when it did that, it just vibrated all the cells in my body. And my body just was vibrating like crazy. I felt every little cell of my body vibrating. And so I allowed myself to just drift into this energy, into this ball, and very quickly, I saw these images, like these images of bodies, okay? A lot of bodies. And so 3 or 4 of those bodies come up to me, and they don't have a face. They don't have like real detailed hands. They're not dressed in any clothes, okay? They're just purely bright lights, okay? But they have a shape of a body, sorta. And the crazy thing was that I looked at them as they were coming towards me, and I could feel them. I could feel them like I knew them, like they were really like family to me, but I didn't know why. And so they came up to me, they hugged me, and the moment they hugged me, my body that was already shaking in this really crazy way really exploded. okay, and it exploded. But when it exploded, this was really something that I came back remembering that I had to share this because there's a meaning to it. When they hugged me, they went into me, and what was left of what I thought was my body just exploded into light. And the light was not any different than their light. Our lights were, there was no beginning or end to my light and their light. We were becoming one. When they hugged me, they were becoming one with me in my body. And it felt so incredibly beautiful. It was, so for a long, long time, I had a hard time explaining how beautiful it felt. In my book, I talk about this is only like in one chapter of the book, but in my book, I talk about how this feeling was like a million hugs, okay? But that didn't really do justice to the feeling. So later on, I changed it. I changed it because it was, what I changed it to was far more accurate than what I felt with a million. I mean, a million hugs is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. One hug is beautiful. Okay, it feels great. But that wasn't what I felt. And I felt like every cell in my body, and we have like 50 trillion cells in our body. Every cell of my body was blowing up, and every cell of my body, I could feel every cell like it was me. Like all of a sudden I saw and felt 50 trillion me's. Felt it. Okay? Which was wild. It was really wild to feel something like that. And all of them went exploded. Like, like this is too much. Beautiful. And what it felt like, to be very, very honest, it felt like an orgasm. But 50 trillion of them. Okay? And so if you can imagine 50 trillion orgasms at one time, of course you're going to go, blah, you're going to explode, okay? But it's that beautiful. It was that intense. And so when you have that kind of experience, and that didn't stop, okay? It just kept going, okay? You don't want it to ever stop. You don't want to ever leave that kind of a place. Why would you? Why? I mean, when I talk to a lot of experiencers who have had this feeling, and we're talking about it, and I said, well, this kind of felt like an orgasm with 50 trillion times. And they're like, yeah, you're right, okay? But they don't know how to describe that, when they're interviewing and stuff. Maybe they're not even sure they want to say it that way, but I do, because it is what it is, okay? And so it's a state of ecstasy. And so what happened after that was that after I felt that expansion, I could see way, way, way out there. There was these tiny, tiny little images of other beings that were everybody was staring at me. Everybody had their attention on me. Okay? They knew I was back home again in some way. And so that person, that being way, way out there, way, way out there, I knew that person. I knew that being. I knew that light. I knew them like I knew the most intimate person in my life. And they knew me. I knew their whole story, all their stories, all of them, all the lives that they had lived. And they knew mine. And I thought, wow, that is wild. Everything around me, I can experience it as if I knew all of it as me. And so the last thing I remembered in those dreams was that when I was staring at everything, there was this feeling behind me, like somebody was standing behind me. And that feeling, that being that was behind me, was actually something that I would eventually come to remember here in this world as sort of my guides, my guardians, the collective, as I talk about them now. And I eventually called them, with their permission, Caleb. And so this entity was standing next to me and was telling me, what do I see? And at the time, I didn't care what I saw. I was just like, leave me alone. I'm really feeling really good about this. I don't care. You can go see whatever you want to see. But I was really excited just to be in the experience. But they kept talking. They kept saying, what do you see? What do you see? What do you see? And eventually I looked around because I didn't know. I was seeing everything that I was seeing already. So I didn't see what they were trying to see. And then it hit me. Boom. It hit me. Boom. What they wanted me to see. And then all of a sudden, when that experience, once I realized that, I felt like an arm, like a hand was put on my shoulder, and then all of a sudden I was going through this light, a tunnel of lights, beautiful lights, much of what like other people talk about. It was just really fast. And the next thing I knew, I knew I was coming back here. I didn't want to come back here, but I knew I was coming back here. And so next thing I know, I felt like somebody threw me on my bed, and I landed into my body, and that big push was what woke me up. And the next thing I knew, I was doing it all over again. I was crying, and I didn't want to be here. And that's when I went finally to my mom, and I asked her, did some of this? I mean, obviously she didn't know my near death, but I said, did this happen? And then she said, yeah, all of that happened. At least the part about my near death experience. But I kept it quiet for many, many years. No way was I going to tell anybody what I experienced. I would have been seriously medicated. I would have been put in a hospital, and I would have been seriously medicated. And there were just too many things that had happened in my life already, which maybe we'll be able to talk about, but my life was not normal at all. And that was okay, because I would rather my life not be normal, because I don't know if this normal that we live in right now is really normal. And so why experience that when I could experience all these supernatural things that started to happen throughout my life? So that's my story. Probably a little longer than you would like it. I wasn't even sure I was going to go into this kind of detail, but yeah, that's what happened in my near-death experience.
I absolutely loved hearing about it, and I was so impressed by the fact that, when your mom was praying, she was not so much praying, but she was giving gratitude to the Lord. She was just grateful for having had you in your life. And I think most of us, when we're faced with this idea of losing a child, we'd think, no, can I please have him a bit longer? Can he stay here? And it seems like your mom was so wise at that time to just turn to gratitude and to, imagine that future for her little boy, not knowing that he is going to be okay.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the way that you said it about wisdom is really, really important. She did not, when I asked her, tell me about this, she had this wisdom about her, but she didn't know she had the wisdom. She just knew something. She knew something about herself that she didn't know how to explain. And so the best way that she could explain it was in the way that she described it in her faith, in the way that others would have described it for her. Now, why that's important is because, as I write in the book about this, she did not realize at the moment that she was doing this that she had total control of my destiny. She had no idea that when she was saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and had all these beautiful, loving images of what she had lived with in my life, and then she started to see and feel the images of my future, she didn't understand that she was expressing her emotions or her feelings into this game, into this reality, which I later on describe as a game, and because it is. She did not know that she tapped into a language of the game that the game would understand much more powerfully than languages that had to do with fear and wanting and lack. She did not understand it. She just did it naturally. And because of that, the game, the you want to call it the game, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, any of those things, it immediately gave her that reality. And that's why when she got back to the hospital, I was fine again. She did not realize it because she was so embedded in her religion that she thought that she had done something to cause God, the Lord, to do something for her. She didn't realize that she already had the ability to do it, okay, because of the way of what we are, what I talk about later on. She gave me all the clues. It was like a whole bunch of clues, and more of those clues came later on. as to who we really are and why it's possible to create miracles, to manifest things that we believe are impossible to create. And so all my life I've spent like a little detective trying to figure out all of these things because I had to. Like with many people who are experiencing near deaths, or if they experience what we call STEs, which are spiritually transformative experiences, when they go through these experiences, they start to remember things about who they are, and those things typically are supernatural. Those things typically are not easily explained in this world. And so they need to do this investigation, meaning they have to go inside. Sometimes they'll go out and research and stuff. Okay, but again, back then there wasn't really I don't like to talk about it because it kind of gives me away in terms of my age, but you don't have those things. You don't have those things, so you have to go for sure inward. You can't talk to anybody about this stuff. Right? You barely can talk about it now, but you couldn't do it back then. So what I realized is that really, really early on, she showed me how this thing works, how this game works, if you can understand where you are creating those emotions from. And when you do that, even if you don't understand it completely, because she never did, but she knew, because she knew inside somewhere in her consciousness, she knew that she was something else. And boom, she went inside, exploded with her emotions and appreciation and gratitude. Those were the perfect languages of the game. And the game said, okay, you got it. New order. We're going to give his life back. Not because you asked and they gave it to you, but you asked because you asked. You said, give it to me. You didn't ask for it in the way that she didn't ask for, like, please, please, please. She said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And the game, and the universe, the Lord, the game, whatever, however you want to describe it, said, okay, you want more of that? You want more of that? We'll have him back in the life. That's how it works. That's how it worked, and that's how later on I would understand how much, much more, how all of this operates.
So I absolutely love this, that you're saying your mom had full control in that moment on whether you were coming back or not. And I think, you know, almost every parent that has had a child, they surely experience the child being sick, at least with a cold. So if you ever had, you know, a remote that you could say, okay, delete cold or take it out, you would certainly want to press it immediately. And what you're saying is we essentially have that remote, but it's almost like a mystery remote. We almost cannot see what the letters say. So it's a bit of like a hit and run with what we're ordering. And we're not able to get the thing that we say we want. But that it essentially does work. So what you're saying is what we're getting is exactly what we've ordered. It's just that we're so confused that we're just blurting out orders inconsistently and not knowingly. So
well done, well said, very well said. We covered it all. That's it. Yeah, that's you did a really beautiful job of saying that. We're just blurting out all these orders, and we don't know how to put any real serious emotion behind a specific one. There's so many orders that we're putting in, but here's the thing that happens, and it does not, I want to say, this does not have to happen this way, but it's usually the way it happens right now. When we are faced with a life and death situation, okay, we stop getting into our analytical mind. Yes, people say our brain, but no, there's an aspect of our consciousness here that feeds into the information that goes into the brain. We won't need to get into that, okay? But that part of our consciousness, okay, is what helps us to create this reality. But it's a very analytical reality, okay? It's based on a very strict set of very, very detailed rules of 3D, okay? And why I'm saying all of this is because when you go in, into some space inside of you, into your intuition, into this experiential feeling. You go deep into your gut feelings, or you go deep into the mind part where you're talking to your voice, so to speak. When you do that, it can be very natural when it becomes life and death. Okay? Because in life and death, you don't have time to question yourself. You don't have time to doubt yourself. Okay? You don't sit there and go, okay, man, this might work, maybe. No. You instinctively have very precious moments to be able to do something with it. You don't know what you're doing, but you start to go in. Like in her case, she started to go in, and she went deep into that space. And instead of saying, please, 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 because all she was going to get was more of the same thing, she said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that I was asking for, what I feel in my heart. And those are powerful, powerful messages that she was able to then change like that reality. And this happens all the time. We call them miracles, but they're not. What they are is we're able to tap into ourselves, to remember something about ourselves. We don't know what, but to remember something about ourselves and our ability to control this game in a way that most people would consider a miracle, but it's very natural. And so why that's all really important is because we're not talking about miracles. What we're talking about here is remembering who you are, remembering why you're capable of doing this. So for most people, those that maybe have heard some of my other interviews, I talk about this. This was the message. This was the message that I had to come back to this world and share. We are not who we believe we are. Is that a shocking message? No. I'm sure that you have heard this from many of your interviewees. The only difference is that, at least in my case, I was able to take all the pieces of all this incredible puzzle, all the pieces, the spiritual pieces, the metaphysical pieces, the alchemistic pieces, the science pieces, mathematical pieces, you name it. It just came somewhat naturally over time for me, because this was one of the things I came back with. A lot of people that have near-death experiences have gifts. We won't call them gifts. We're just going to say that their talents come online. Online, like a program, it comes online, okay? And they usually try not to really do much with them. It's already hard enough to explain what happened in the other part of this dimensional world. They don't explore it. But now more and more are starting to talk about that. Most of them are premonitions. They can see into the future. They can explain all sorts of things. Okay. Back then, we didn't do anything. Back then, you were just trying that. No, you didn't do it. But that was the message. That's the big message that many near-death experiencers, if they're not talking about it yet, they will be very soon. That is what they came here to talk about. Many of them will say, I came back because, well, I had so many things I needed to do here. I wasn't finished yet. I had maybe had to resolve problems that I left open. That's not really why they came back. The reason why they came back is now. They're going to speak about things that they themselves weren't ready to acknowledge or admit. And they're going to talk about some astonishing things that exist here in this reality, if you want to call it that. Again, it's a game, and what's going to happen in the near future. So that's really the whole point in how I experienced my mother's reactions. She was in control. She just didn't know it.
I absolutely love that. And I have to say, one of my biggest takeaways from almost, I think, a year of doing this interview, so I think we passed a year actually, is very much starting to believe that my own life is not so much objective as it is a game. And I don't know that I call it a game, but I call it a bit of like a play. And whenever, there's maybe friction with somebody, I'm thinking, well, why is this character in my life? Almost like Monopoly, where we are taking certain roles. I'm thinking, are you here to teach me something? What's the lesson here? What's the purpose of that? And I think it just made me navigate life a bit easier, because I tend to think, well, if this is all a game and it's happening for me, and I think it's just a frame of reference for me, then what do I want and how do I achieve the next thing? And, just assuming I'm the center of the universe and everything is happening around me, then what would happen? What would it look like? And I think it's just a very powerful place to create from and to think of. Definitely much more so than being in, the common narrative of, whatever's going on in the world. So if you turn on the news, for instance, you're immediately sucked into this 1,001 things that are happening all around the world. Everything's bad. It's going to only get worse. You should be afraid. You should be very afraid, terrified. And it seems like somebody else is controlling that game and I'm just a pawn in it. Whereas I can choose my own sort of version where I'm the star and everything else just fits in for me. So I love that you make it approachable for us to sort of talk about this.
Well, Sabrina, I don't know if there's anything more to talk about. You just summed it up beautifully. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk a little bit later. Bye-bye. But I do actually want to comment on a few things that you said. Okay. Um, I I I love that you call it a play. Okay. I often say it's a game, it's a play, it's an illusion, it's a simulation, it's a hologram, it's a dream, whatever clicks for you. But here's the thing about the play, because this is also really important. Okay. The way I talk about it is that we're in the game, we're playing in a dream, and in the dream we're actually playing in a role, in like a play, okay, like a play, like a theatrical play, okay. So now I'm connecting all of these different terms: dreams, games, plays, okay. All of them have something in common. All of them are acting out a version of a reality that doesn't exist. Okay, in a game, you're playing a certain game. There's roles. You're playing out a role. Okay, whatever that role is. Okay. In a dream, same thing. You have a dream. You're in a dream, and you don't even know who these people are, but you know them because all of a sudden you're having a dream with them, and they know you. But do you ever wonder? Have you ever noticed that unless you have very lucid dreams, have you ever noticed that you never see yourself in those dreams? You don't have a mirror. You don't see yourself in water or a glass or anything. You believe that you are playing the game, in your case, as Sabrina. But you don't know that for sure because you've never seen yourself. Okay? The reason you never see yourself in the dream is because chances are pretty darn good that you're not Sabrina in that dream. And if you started to see that, if you saw that in the mirror, you're going to wake up and go, why am I dreaming about I'm a man in my dream. I'm a child. I'm whatever. I'm not Sabrina though. Because when you are dreaming, you actually get to see, okay, this is kind of a little bit off subject, but we get to see all the lives that you are playing in right now. Okay? You call them a dream, sure, okay. But it's all just people say, I wish I knew how to astral project. And because they want to go to other planets, they want to go to other places, I said, you already are astral projecting. You don't even know it, okay? It's called your dreams. You are actually going into other dimensions, other parallel realities in order to experience a whole entirely different story that has nothing to do with you, okay? But in your dream, you're doing this, it's good, it's bad, it's whatever. You wake up, if it's a bad dream, you go, oh, what do you do when it's a dream? Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really matter. What do you do? What do you do when you go to a play? When you're in a play or you go in a play, you are acting a role. You're acting a role. Is it your role? No, but you're acting it. There are so many ways in which to see the same thing. Okay, this illusion, you are playing a role. You're in a game where you're playing a character called Sabrina, and you really believe that you are actually in this thing called reality. But in all of those instances, you're just pretending that you're actually playing in this game or this play. So I love because no matter how you look at it, and this is not me just saying it, there are a lot of people who have had near death experiences that will say it's a play of life. And so some people will sit there and go, oh, this is a really good example, like an analogy. Oh, I can okay, people are coming in from stage left, stage right. Oh yeah. No, this is how it really actually works. Okay, this is actually in the play, people are in and out, they're playing characters. When they leave the stage, they're no longer there. Okay, that's pretty much how it works here too, in this game. So the similarities are identical. It doesn't really matter. And I know you said some other things, but I got so stuck on the play thing that I forgot what the other things were. So sorry about that.
So one thing that's stuck with me from what you said that I struggle understanding, and I'm sure other people are as well, is when we have a dream, it's actually not so much a dream, but we're tapping into this other timeline, I would call it. Is that then, so perhaps in that other timeline, you know, my name's not Sabrina, I do not look the way I look in this avatar. Would that mean then that my soul gets fragmented into, in this case, 2 pieces, but potentially many more? And do they sort of like come together then on the other side? Or walk me through how that would work in this example.
Yeah, so this is something that, again, I don't often get a chance to talk about, but so great questions. What happens is that the answer is yes to the fact that I'm going to be a little bit more careful about the way, not that you're not careful, but I'm going to be a little bit more mindful of the way that I want to explain it. But it's all the same thing, all the same thing. When you say soul, I'm going to give it a different name just because I want to give it more of a flavor of what we really are, not just in this realm, but who we are in the higher realms of consciousness, the 4D, the 5D, the 6th, 7th, 8th, all those. We're not souls, okay? And I really, for those people who are listening, really want you to just kind of sit there and chew on that just a little bit. We're not souls, okay? Well, first of all, what's a soul? You know, and where is it? Where's your soul, Sabrina? Do you tell me where your soul is? I don't know. Somebody told me I have a soul, and I don't know, it's maybe here. Maybe here. Nobody knows, okay? The truth of it is that a soul, in today's language, would be consciousness, okay? And consciousness is kind of understood. The consciousness kind of understood. The consciousness is everywhere. Now, that wasn't always the case. For the longest time, many people just thought consciousness was in these bodies, something in it, in the bodies. Okay, well, that kind of sounds like a soul then, right? It's in the body, soul's in the body, must be the same thing, okay? And the reason I bring this up is because as you understand and you can move out of sort of the spirituality piece, all the same thing, spirituality and science and metaphysics and mathematics are just different ways of looking at the same thing, just different glasses, okay? But if you can look at it as consciousness, okay, then you start to realize that everything around you, and this took a little time for me to accept, everything, even the walls, the chairs, everything, has consciousness in it. Everything has consciousness in it. How's that possible? Well, everything has energy. Energy has frequencies and vibrations. Okay, I get that. That's just common physics, okay? But what we know of as consciousness is emotional consciousness, okay? Everything that is emotional consciousness is part of something we call, okay, now I'm going to go to a different direction, okay? It's called the divine feminine, all right? Ooh, divine feminine, you're talking about it, talking science here, parallel realities, and how did divine feminine come into us? Remember, it's all a big puzzle, It's all a big puzzle with many different levels. Okay, and you gotta. When I was a kid, these puzzles had all these levels, and I didn't like those puzzles because it was hard to know which puzzle was supposed to be for what place. But that's how this reality works. It's too boring if it was just one puzzle with one series of pictures in it. No, it would have to be many. So why did I bring in the Divine Feminine? Because the Divine Feminine has energy of emotions. It's the emotions is part of the creation of reality. Okay, emotions, the energy in motion is what helps to create these worlds that we exist in 3D, or play in, I should say, play in, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, all right. So if you start to understand how these emotions are everywhere. And here's the other thing. I have to also explain this. So if everything has emotional energy and everything is part of this Divine Feminine thing, whose emotions does it have? If I am telling you, which I was before we got on, that you have to accept that you are playing your own game. Your own game. Not everybody, not 8 billion people are playing the same game. That's for maybe another discussion. But you are accepting that you're playing your own game. Then whose emotions are you experiencing in everything you're in? Yours. Your emotions. You are creating this reality. Everybody's creating their own reality. Okay? And so if you understand that everything has a little bit of your energy, your consciousness, okay, not so much the soul, you understand that that consciousness exists everywhere. And whose consciousness? Yours. Okay? So then you go, okay, I can kind of see that. Okay, but what does this have to do with me playing in another game and I'm playing somebody else? Well, when you are dreaming, like I was just telling you, okay, you get to see just a little bit of some of these other games that you're playing. Why? Because one of the things, remember I told you at the beginning that when I was in my near-death experience and the hand pulled me back because I saw something? What I saw was something that I've talked about in other conversations. What I saw, and this is so important for people, I know some people may have heard this from other people or maybe from me, but it's so important, so important. We are not the creation of this beautiful light. When I looked into this sea of beings, and it was going forever, okay? I could never finish counting all the beings that were in this sea, okay? When I was looking at all this, it hit me that we were not babies of the sun, of the God. We were not the children of this light. Okay? We were the light. We came together, all of us, collectively as one. And why is that important? Because this is where we're going right now as a human race of spiritual beings. We are starting or will start to remember this particular important message. This was the number one message that I knew I would someday start to tell people. And this is a big message because it's not something that a lot of people necessarily would accept, okay? A lot of people would accept that we have been created by God. And it goes by all of these other names. And then you have, in the Christian stuff, it's all about Yeshua and stuff. It is. There's pieces to this, but not in the way that you understand it, not in the way that other people taught you to accept it. This is why near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences are so powerful, because they get to allow you, and even dreaming, if you knew what you were seeing in your dreams, they allow you to see beyond the things that you have been taught to believe that are not real in this reality, which is basically everything. The moment that you were conceived, you were collecting information about this world, but what information were you collecting? You were collecting other people's illusion of this reality. And in some cases, in many cases, you were collecting their delusions of this reality. And then you took it and you received it and you became that story. You became somebody else's story. And so the whole process of remembering, the whole reason why all of these near-death experiencers and all these other people are having all of these other incredible experiences that are shattering their world is because they realize that there's something beyond the veil. You've heard that, the veil. What's this veil? The other side of the veil is the truth. It's the same thing that we experience when we die. And some of them, like us, like me, come back and tell the story. We're not here, and this kind of gets to a little bit of our conversation before we came on. We're not here to die anymore. There will be many that will die between now and whenever we wake up, but we are here to remember that we never have to die to remember who we are. We don't have to. We can resurrect our consciousness and ascend into a higher level of remembering that we are God. Or gods, whichever way you want to explain it. Oh my God, how do you say such a thing? It's in some of the most sacred books. Biblically, the Bible says right at the beginning that it describes God in the plural. It uses the words we and our to describe God. A plural, meaning many. But we don't acknowledge that. There are clues everywhere in the game that help us to remember who we are. The biggest clues are now the ones that are coming back and telling their stories, but they're not telling their stories just to tell you what happened over there. They're telling their stories because they want you to understand that you are so much bigger than you know you are. Other people have told you you are not. And this is what is happening now in this world. What is this time in history is about the big ascension. The big ascension, the resurrection, the ascension, the moving into 5D, the end of times. It's about remembering that you're in a dream. That's what you are doing. You're in a dream. And sooner or later, you're going to remember who you are. And when you do that, like any dream, you say enough. Enough. You wake up. That's what a lucid dream is. You say enough. Okay? And when you do that, the game ends. What does that mean? It means our consciousness rise into 4 and 5D, and we literally ascend into a new world that looks and feels like this one, except that it's heaven on earth. And that's why they call it heaven on earth, because heaven comes. Heaven is the 6th dimension. That's what we're here to do. And it's not going to take thousands of years to do it. It's going to take 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 6. That's it.
So that's a very interesting, I want to call it a bold look at the future. I love it. And I think we've heard so much about 5D. I'll be honest, I don't think that I fully grasp the extent of it. But I love the way you talk about consciousness, and I love the way you talk about ascending and what that would mean. But I want to go a bit deeper into that version of the future. So how do you see, the world we live in moving into this version that we call heaven on earth? What do the next 3 to 5 years look like?
So the biggest mistake that people make is that they believe, and I've had this same conversation where I tell people they believe that they're here to shift themselves, yes, but shift the world into another state of consciousness, okay? They believe that something is going to happen in this world that is going to change things and cause us to change our direction and go into another sort of, not reality, but because everybody believes this is the reality. So everything has to happen here, okay? But what they don't realize right now, the ones who are just starting to remember and starting to ask these questions, who am I, what am I doing here, starting to maybe believe that there's more to this reality than what most people have been telling them, is that nothing has to happen in this world. Nothing. Nothing has to happen in this world. I'm going to make it really super clear. Nothing has to happen here. This game is a game that is a 3D game. And if it's a 3D game, it's going to always be a 3D game. You don't change the world as some people try to believe that they have to do, which is why they make it so difficult for themselves to believe that something this huge can happen so quickly. Because if that's what people believe, then I'm going to tell you right now, that's not going to happen. Okay, that is not what I am talking about. I am talking about worlds that we cannot feel right now with our 6 senses. We certainly cannot feel them or see them or touch them or taste them with our 5 senses. Okay, I mean our 3D senses. Okay, our 5 physical senses. Okay, we're talking about raising consciousness, and this is not. I've said this before. This is not just me saying it. There are actual instruments around the world that are actually measuring how the frequency of the planet is rising. Okay? Consciousness is rising. Why are they doing this? They're doing it partly because they understand what I'm trying to say, that when your consciousness rise, the theory, okay, this is not theory. None of the stuff that I'm telling you is theory. It might be in the 3D world, but I am telling you it is not theory. The theory is this world, okay? The reality is the world that I'm talking about, the one that all these near-death experiencers talk about to some extent, okay? But in this world, there are machines that will measure this, okay? So why is that important? Because as your consciousness rises, this world that you're in, the 3D world, you see that you're starting to separate from that world, okay? Consciousnessly, meaning different language, the soul, okay? You're starting to ascend. Just like what we believe happens when we die, we ascend out of this world. Same difference, just that in one case we're in a body, the other one we're not, okay? So how do you ascend the body up to another level? Well, you have to understand that the body is not what you believe it is too. It's part of the illusion, okay? All right, the body is an illusion just as much as everything else is an illusion. And we can talk about that because there's all sort of neural system stuff and all sorts of stuff, okay? But we won't get into that right now. But if you go and you start ascending and this world stays here, it's like a rocket ship that leaves that piece, that first piece that takes you out of the earth, and that piece just falls back down. In this case, this 3D world keeps going. It just keeps going down a very 3D path. And that other piece that you're ascending to, the 5D world, that's a world that's magical. It's a world where you can use your consciousness to create anything you desired. That's why 5D is creation energies. 5D is creation energies. 5D is using your imagination to create the things that we've been told not to believe in because they're too childish, which is why I tell people that the only way, and it's not just me, okay? Biblically, there's another passage in the Bible, and I'm not a Bible person, but there's just some good, juicy stuff in there and many other doctrines, okay? Many other documents. It says the only way to enter into the kingdom of heaven, is the kingdom of heaven is a higher level of consciousness, okay? Is through a child. It's through a child. Why? Because a child doesn't get caught up in the minutia of everything that it's been taught to accept as what they are. The child plays, okay? It's a really simple explanation, but I go into this more with my students and stuff, but so you get to rise as a child, you get to use your imagination to rise your consciousness. Nobody really talks about this, that your imagination allows your consciousness to rise at a higher frequency, okay? And when your consciousness rises to a higher frequency, guess what? You start to see things, experience things, supernatural things in your life, in you, that you did not know you were capable of doing. You get to start to see more things in your outer world that you were not able to. As a consciousness, as an individual consciousness, and as a planet consciousness, your energies will rise and you will, as a planet, start to see things that are different, odd. Have you ever wondered, for those people that are more into this spiritual stuff than others, have you ever wondered why it is in the last 5 or 10 years, all of these archaeological sites have been found with all these mystical civilizations that existed. Nobody talked about them 10 years ago because they're not even being dug up, they're being found. Okay, because now we can actually vibrationally we can see them. Okay, do you wonder why right now as we're doing this, like in the US, there's this whole big thing about drones and stuff, these big monster drones that are out there. I mean, they're huge. And what I tell people is they've always been there. We just could not see them because our vibration wasn't high enough to get there. We are going to see things and experience things in ways that will not be explained in 3D. But it will be as we move into 4 and 5D. Because creation energy is going to create all of these vibrations to come in and you can see things. That's one part of 5D. The other part of 5D is the oneness piece. Oh, that's a doozy. Because in that one, you're not only going to see things, you're actually going to connect with people and places and things emotionally, really connect with them. And when you connect with them, you're going to start to experience yourself as one with them. And when you start to do that, you start to realize you cannot hurt each other anymore. Because to hurt somebody is to hurt yourself, because you will feel it. If nothing else, you will feel it. And that will stop you from hurting anybody else. And you will start to understand the whole concept, the whole evolution of how you get there. And there's a whole process, there's some steps, but you don't have to worry about them really. Yeah, you kind of do, but you kind of have to feel into them. But this is all part of the way the child would easily do this. That's why I teach this thing called the way of the child, because it's so easy, it's so stupid, it's almost too easy. But we've made it so complicated that here we are, destroying the world and ourselves.
Pretty much, yeah. So Franco, that's been such a good conversation, and I have to say it's one that I will have to replay a couple of times, because I think you've shared lots of things that I really need to take in, and just by listening to it once, it's not going to be enough for me to process it. So I would invite everybody that has listened to our conversation today to tell me what piece of our conversation resonated most with you, and let us know what's the one thing that you will think about and meditate on and that you're taking away from this conversation. Now, for everybody that wants to connect with you, you've mentioned your books, and you're also, I know, teaching this way of the child. So for anybody that wants to hear more, know more from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. You can reach me in 2 places. One is my website, which is francoromero.com. And that will give you a really good flavor for what I teach and how simple the world can be. And it also talks about courses that people can take if they like to help themselves remember. And then the other one is the community that I created for people that want to feel a safety, a security of letting themselves. There's a lot of people that listen to your show that don't have anybody to talk to about what they're experiencing, and there are going to be a lot of them more in the year or two to come. And so I created a community and it's a playground, just like how children play in a playground. So you can reach me at playground.francoromero.com, and you can learn more about the playground. It's a very, very fun place to be and safe place to be.